I got into my parents' record collection when I was younger, and that's what got me into music. And they had everything from the Doors and Steppenwolf to a lot of outlaw country. And, you know, and even stuff like Kenny Rogers, stuff like that laying around the house. But I love all genres. But I think my true like kind of love for it came when I started touring with Pantera. Them and on the Black Sabbath tour. I constantly was hearing those guys on the bus jamming outlaw country, you know, and if it wasn't Willie Nelson, it was Johnny Cash and bands like that. So I just fell in love with the lyrics as well. Like the lyrical content is so fucking real. You know, it's like when you say, if drinking don't kill me, her memory will. It's like, oh, like I wish I wrote that, right? And then whenever I would hear these songs on other people's buses or you know, on my bus, I would think to myself, man, this stuff needs to be heavy. I would hear it heavy, like a song like Ghost Riders in the Sky. I would constantly hear it heavy, like Ghost Riders. I would hear it like that.
I grew up around country. I don't think I listened to anything besides country and then R&B from my mom. That's another record, I guess, down the line. I listened to that until I was probably 13 would be the first time that I got into rock or anything else. But yeah, it was more like Garth Brooks, George Strait, Dwight Yoakam type stuff. Mainly from my dad. And, you know, being from the South, being from Texas and Oklahoma, it's pretty ubiquitous there, so.
To outlaw country music, I probably first heard that when I was a young child in Southampton County, Virginia. I mean, you know, I grew up in the country for a good part of my childhood, literally on a farm, and a lot of people around there listened to that music. Not that I necessarily got along with those people after a while, but I heard the music a lot, you know. I was always a weird punk rock kid out in the country, out in the farmlands.
I discovered my mother's mandolin, and so she started to teach me how to play it. And she liked to sing too, and so I heard her singing some country songs very early on in life, and it was there for me to hear, so I loved it. I have always loved country music. I have a country band called Range War, with titles such as If They Ain't Got Cold Beer in Heaven, Who in the Hell Want to Go? Stuff like that there.
Was there a moment when just outlaw country just struck me as a kid? Not really, because the records were already lying around and I grew up listening to it, and I consider my granddad one of the outlaw legends or timeless guys. So since his records were around, and I'm talking when I was 4 to 6 years old, also had Charlie Daniels, Waylon, Willie, Johnny Paycheck, Merle Haggard, David Allan Coe, on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Jerry Lee Lewis, all those guys. Was lucky enough to have that in the collection. So hearing those songs was already just kind of, I guess, used to it.
Outlaw country, I never heard the term really outlaw country. I just heard the term country music. I grew up in North Carolina. I lived there up until 8 years ago, and just country music was something that was always on the little wooden box radio in my parents' kitchen, you know. Wake up in the morning before school, they had the radio on, you were hearing, it was all like the top 40 country, you know, which is still nothing like the horrible, horrible country that's out there today. But still, it was kind of stuff that my parents liked, and when you're a kid, you don't want to like what your parents like, so I'm just like, this country's stupid, I don't like it.
Coming to appreciate country music more as an adult, I think definitely I can identify with the lyrics a lot more than I could as a child, because country music is a lot about raw hardship and heartbreak. There's a lot of darkness in that, and when you're, you know, a 12-year-old kid, it's really hard to understand the heartache of someone singing about their wife leaving them or something. You know, you're a 12-year-old kid. You're still trying to figure out, you know, whether you want to go BMX or talk to the cute girl down the street.
As I got older and I had some friends, just being on tour, and you know, when you're 6 months on tour away from home and you're on a bus and stuff, and you start listening to different music and things, and you start to hear these country songs that you heard as a kid that didn't make any sense to you. And then now as you're older and you're kind of living through stuff, and you've been through a divorce, and you've been through this, you really did lose your dog, you really did lose these kind of things, these cliche things, and you go, man, I can relate to this. And you can hear some of these artists, man, and they're pouring their hearts into it as much as any metal guy or anything. And that's true, honest country, whether you want to call it outlaw country or what. But then the outlaw term, the country term, comes from, you know, the Hellraiser guys, which was, you know, which was Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings and Hank Jr. and all those dudes. Willie Nelson. Those were like the G.G. Allens and the Nicky Sixes and the, you know, the Lemmys of country. You know, those guys just they shook it up.
You know, I'm from Texas, and I grew up with country music, and a lot of the country music that I happen to particularly like more than other country songs were like the more rebellious dudes. George Jones, Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, Hank Williams. So it was, they were the original Outlaws, and so that's what I always grew up on.
I do remember going out on the road and seeing it officially my first time, and what all happened behind the scenes and with the crowds and how things were. I think my first picture being near Willie Nelson, I was maybe like 5, maybe 6. And then the first time I was ever on stage, I was 10. I was 10 in Atlanta, but that's when Junior was touring with Waylon, Leonard Skinner, and all kinds of others in that market.
Yes, I love country. Some country songs like Johnny Cash.
You know, I guess I didn't realize what was considered outlaw country and what wasn't. Other than like Johnny Cash, there's some obvious ones, but there's some on this record that were questionable. But we decided, hey, let's rip that. We can make that a cool cover. But yeah, you know, John Cash. For sure, obviously Hank III, Dwight Yoakam.
Not at all. I would say it started to grow on me just hanging out with Dez in the back of the bus, you know, probably early on in my, you know, I'd say early on when I joined DevilDriver. He was listening to a lot of Hank III and Johnny Cash and a few other guys, and I openly admit I actually had kind of a hatred toward country music, but I think the stuff that I was exposed to was more of, I guess you would call, pop country. And but the more outlaw country I heard, I still to this day I don't have like a huge love for outlaw country music, but there definitely is a lot of stuff out there that I do like, and I appreciate the songwriting, and I do enjoy the way country music has, the way they tell stories is a little bit different than a lot of other genres.
I mean, to be honest, I think some of the early tours, touring with DevilDriver in like the mid-2000s, I kind of got turned on to it through Dez. So listening to, you know, everybody from, you know, Johnny Cash to Waylon Jennings and beyond that. I mean, when I got asked to do Copperhead Road, I wasn't really familiar with Steve Earle, to be honest.
That's about all I really knew about outlaw country. Cause it's kind of Mike and Dez kind of talked about it, and the rest of us kind of just, yeah, sure, let's rip it, you know. By no means did I realize, or any of us really realized, that this thing was going to come together and we were going to have all these guests on here, it really came together, you know, and that's kind of what makes it a rad thing, you know.
And then one day we were off tour. We were like on an off date or something like that. We were at the mall, and we went into one of those places and did like one of those shots, like we all dress up as cowboys. And we got a big photo of that made, and everyone had shotguns and stuff. And I just kept looking at that thing on the tour bus going, you know what? We should do a cover record, and we should do something no one's really done. We should cover outlaw country and just do it heavy as balls and get a lot of people that I've turned on, like you said, like Brock from 36, or like Hank 3, who turned me on to some real deal, you know, like Wayne the Train Hancock and stuff like that. Let's get some people and let's see if we can do this. And I hit Napalm, and funny thing, because I mean, they're from Austria, right? So they're not supposed to get it, but they got it. They were like, oh, okay, we get this. This could be really something great. And I just think metal needs a shaking up, really. So we want to do something different.